Welcome to One Bad Podcast. Here's your hosts, KD and Shaner.
KD, we're about to talk about the 3-song EP, the next era, our beginnings of talking about going out to Vancouver, but we almost didn't make it, buddy. Meaning you almost didn't make it because you were sick for about a year straight. We couldn't figure it out, and you eventually moved out of the band house, and we wrapped up that era. You got to tell the people. I thought like my friend might die. Like I don't know what is going on.
So the band house was such an important part of OBS's development. And it was just such an old, decrepit house, and it ended up being like condemned shortly after, and then like no one could live there, and so they tore it down. But yeah, I remember I lived in the back part of the house. They built this addition, and it was like this patio, basically a rooftop patio on the back of the house, and there was like this enclosure, and that's where I lived in that sort of this random place. But it was a great room, a big room. All this natural light came in, but it turns out. Yeah, I remember I got sick one week and then just kind of like it hung around in like my chest for like months on end, like months.
And I should mention that your drum kit was in the room directly underneath your bedroom, so it's a double whammy. Continue.
Yeah, so I'm drumming and sleeping, living and breathing in this certain this vertical area, and it turns out that whole area is just infested with black mold. So. And it could have been like I could have,
I laugh about it now, but man, that could have been deadly.
Could have been bad. I was like, what is wrong with me? And I think I was, to be honest, I was also quite depressed. That's the only time I've been like that. I really suffered from depression for like a year. It was just a tough point in my life. But so like the depression.
Also, have you ever thought about how much the black mold contributed to the depression? Like, was it chemical and mental?
It was black mold sun. Yeah. It was like. It was physical and mental for sure, and that's so. Anyways, I moved out of the band house and I cleared up and met Julia, and I was happy, and like all of a sudden my health came back. So it was like I think it was a multitude of factors, and so I want to just cover that before just to tell the kids out there if you're sick and you feel like you can't get the song Black Hole Sun out of your head. It could be because there's actually black mold in your system. So,
and in your bedroom.
Just maybe call a mold expert or something. But anyways, So
it was, I mean, that era ended. It's kind of a cool jumping off point because you have these moments in life where you realize like something has to change now. Like we've been, we started in 2004. This is getting into like 2009-ish. And it just felt like, we'd become pretty popular in Saskatoon, honestly. Like we'd gone from playing to nobody to, we played different places like the Roxy. We basically had a residence in, then we kind of got a residency, like we never called it that, but at Bud's, and we played, sold out shows there. So we were getting to this point where it was like, okay, like, Saskatoon, that's our hometown. We love it there. But obviously, if you're going to try to blow up, like you got to get out. And we just, the band house, the black mold, we moved out at midnight. It wasn't exactly an eviction, but almost. But it was like time to move on, right? And the way the timing of this stuff works, it's a great story that kicks off the next phase of our career, which is we got a chance to open for Default. We opened for them a couple times. It was like a New Year's show, and then we got it was the basement of TCU when they opened for us. We get to the gig thinking we're opening for Default at this like big show, and the promoter's like, "Hey, good news. They're opening for you. You're going to go on after them."
Classic promoter, like just like fucking car salesman, it's like, I've got a pitch for you, and because basically I think Default decided we don't want to play that late, right? The ticket sales were good, but not crazy. So they're like, let's just play early and get the hell out of here. But OBS, you're closing the night now. You're the headliner, right?
But, it's one of these things where you never know where the break is going to come in or, and we've, at this point now, we played so many shows that we're like, well, fuck, I guess it's another one of these nights, right? And so it actually turns out to be like a fun gig. The drunks stuck around and we had a fun time. But we met Default's drummer, Danny Craig, beautiful human being who, unbeknownst to us, like saw our set, and we ended up. I remember I got a call from Dallas Smith, and he was like, "Hey, you guys were great, and we wonder if you want to come play a couple more shows." We did 2 more. Went to Swift Current, your hometown. Shout out.
Medicine Hat.
And Medicine Hat, and that was one of those things where you think, like, we've done so many nights like that they went to shit or something, like, oh yeah, you're gonna play after the headliner. It's like it's another write-off, but it turns out to be this great moment because we met Danny and he came up to us. I think maybe, I don't know if you remember, maybe it was after the Swift Current show, right?
No, it was Medicine Hat. I remember.
Was it Medicine Hat?
It was like we had the chat in the kitchen part, like of the bar, and yeah, I remember like basically. Again, back then, like, you don't know what you don't know. I thought it was, remember we joked, we kept thinking we get record deals handed to us after a show. And in that moment, I felt like that was as good as that. Danny was like, he's like, man, we should do some songs. I'm a producer. Come up to Vancouver, let's record, And I remember just thinking it's like we'd made it, and it was a game changer. But it was just that naivete I had. Like I just thought like this is it, we've made it, And so it's like that was had Danny not seen the potential and also took the opportunity to like reach out, we never would have gone to that next level, or it would have taken a lot longer, I think,
Totally, buddy. And it's cool that you actually remember that because I didn't remember you guys chatting in the kitchen, and maybe it might have just been the 2 of you, and you probably told me after because some of those days are hazy, especially in Medicine Hat. But
yeah.
But you're right, and it's one of these things where again, I've been asked, I know you've been asked like a million times about like, how do you make it? Like I feel bad for bands. Like I asked people that, like, what do we do? Like, how do we get seen? How do you, get these breaks? And the truth is we got ours is from playing a million shows. And at that point it was like, say no to nothing, like go on this tour, drive 1,000 hours to, the worst gig of your life, but you never know. And you and I remember talked about that. It's part of what kept our spirits up was like, you never know who might be at that show. And we'd open for some bands like obviously much bigger than us at the time, like Buck Cherry. And oftentimes, as we also found out with more bigger bands we open for, they rarely watch your set, and that's not their fault. As we also learned as headliners, you're fucking exhausted after your gig or, you're prepping usually before, which is why you often don't see openers. So it was cool that Danny saw us and actually saw something in us because we were still starting to get our shit together, but still raw. And so that was the game changer. Now I'll ask you because I'm pretty fuzzy on this. We did before the Red album, the Scarecrows album, and all that. We did a 3-song EP, and I will say to wrap up also the band house saga. The last song that got written in that place was Scarecrows. Hicks came up with that riff,
right?
Which is, I should mention that because like that's kind of a cool. When I think about that era, I'm like, that's a cool bookend. Like it ends just getting the nugget of the idea for Scarecrows.
Well, I remember you guys we called it beer crack because remember at the beginning of the recording he cracked a beer and he said you ready and then whatever, right?
That's
so
right,
the
dude.
Original title beer crack.
Yeah, we'll bring back the original version. Dude, I forgot all about that. That's so true because I think Hicks had just bought Pro Tools so that we could try to do some more of our own recording and stuff. And but yeah, so what was the next thing? Did Danny suggest the 3-song EP or do you remember how that went?
Yeah, I mean he gave us his cost, which was like he's like, you want to do 10 songs to be this much, and we were like we have to start robbing banks or something, But he also made a point, like, don't do a record. Like, let's use 3 songs to get a record deal. And that was from day one. He's like, U.S. deal, sure, but like, there's also 604 records here, and he was tight with them from Default and Chad and stuff. So we just sort of settled on like 3 songs, through that. But then we started demoing like stuff. But yeah, I think it was like, let's do 3 songs. I remember very well recording out with Danny and stuff and getting like Jay Dakeman and stuff to help on the drum, like to set up, be my first drum tech ever. But for me, the big change, and I remember it was also with change comes challenge, right? Like, I mean, I remember it was so hard. Danny was like, these songs got to be better, and that was for all of us. And I imagine for you, especially as a lyricist, like he's like, I don't know what this is about. Write something better, you know. And that,
Yeah.
I think a lot of musicians don't want to hear that, right? Or this, your drum beat on this is like too busy. It sucks. Make it simpler, you know. And they're like, oh, and that's the sort of like growth that you have to. Or to Hicks, how many times you say to Hicks, like, stop playing so much, just lock into the riff and don't do it slop, like, you know. Just,
Yeah.
Like he gave us all brutal criticism, and that was like, we needed to hear it. Every band does, right? And now I think we take it, you know, now we just take it with it, like we take it easily now. Like, hey, make that vocal catchier, make that beat, whatever. But we've also earned the ability to like push back on those kind of opinions if we want.
Yep.
But back then, we was like, we didn't really have that. We pushed back, but we had to really just become better writers and performers, and that was. Some bands I don't think can handle that, but thankfully I think we could. It took a bit of time, you know?
Yeah. Man, that's cool that you brought that up, because we kind of teased that earlier on, where we were talking about, I think when we were getting into the Orange City, like writing and stuff, and just asking like, what does it take to get on the radio? Like, not only like, who do you got to know? Who do we have to send our things to, but like, or our songs and stuff, but like sonically, like why don't we break through? Because you know, you fall in love with your own songs in a way too, and you think, well, this feels like as good as the new Finger 11 track. Like, what's the deal? But you hit the nail on the head, because that was the big. It's such a painful moment. You're right, which was like, you have to be like almost beyond perfect when you're in the studio, and like you can't. You know, of course, even in that era when we were recording, now that's like 2010-ish, that EP. It's like, you know, you can tune vocals, you know, but you can't tune shitty vocals. And that's something I learned. It's like, you got to sing it as pitch perfect as you can get it, and with as much feel as you can. And then they'll tweak it, you know, but up to that point, you're thinking like, wow, it's all performance. Like, let's get raw, let's get crazy. Same with the drums. And it's like, no, like, we can move the kick down or the kick around, you know, just to like get that kind of perfect timing lined up. But like, if you're way off on it, they can't fix a shitty take, you know, like you can. Yeah. And so that was like, what's it take to get on the radio? It's like, become way better, not only as musicians, but you make a great point, also as writers. And that was really difficult, because it's taken me a long time in my life to allow people in, and like allow people to say, like, you know, especially when they're talking about your art, lyrics, you know, your beats as well, and just like, you know, dumb this beat down, like it'll be better for the song. And you're like, Keith Moon would not do that, like, but you never know what their sessions were like. What was Keith Moon coming in with, and what did he come out with? Like, what did they, you know, there's like that level of compromise, but also like, this is the reason I'm getting into this. We're moving up on time here, but it's a key moment, I think, for us. And I think the biggest thing I know I learned, and I think we really took this forward, which was the number one thing that matters is the song, period. And it's like, what does the song need? You know, like what do you need? You've got a great idea. Whoever wrote the riff, doesn't matter who came up with the idea. You got a great idea for a song, but now what does that need? What's going to serve it? You know, is it a meat and potatoes beat with some flourishes? Is it a vocal line that's not screaming every 5 minutes? Is it, do the lyrics need to be changed? Not because, you know, as a lyricist, like I love Chris Cornell kind of lyrics. Like I was always into more ethereal, less like, you know, I kind of like storytelling, but I always like, you know, he always called it like walking into a kind of a lyrical environment. Like, what is Black Hole Sun? I mean, you can't say, well, it's just a song about this. And I like that stuff. And,
Yeah.
but it can be difficult for listeners sometimes, where you're like, it can be so nebulous that it's like, well, what is that? You know? But man, you're right. Like, and it's a great place to come to the end of this episode, because, man, this is a pivotal era because of what happens next. But what a thing to learn, where you're like, as much touring as we had done, as many, you know, all those hours in the jam room, in the band house, rehearsing, writing, it was like, I feel, and I'll give you the last word on this, like, I felt like, holy shit, this is the beginning. You know, like, how did you feel in that moment of like, when we went out to packed into I think it was your parents' car, and drove all our shit out to Vancouver to record?
Well, it was my grandma-in-law's car actually. But yeah, I think you're right. We played enough, we put in enough hours at our instruments so we could play well, right? And that's key. But we didn't know how to write radio hits, and those are two different things, right? And whether or not they're hits or radio, just write songs that are just great songs. We hadn't done that yet, and I think Danny was probably the biggest influence on us for that. He showed us how to be able to he didn't tell us how to write songs. He showed us how we as OBS could write our best songs, and that was the greatest gift that I think a producer's given us. So let's leave it there and let's jump into the whatever's next, whatever you think.
Dude, it's the next phase. It's a big conversation comes up because we got a big carrot dangled in front of us, which was a record deal. So that's where we go with the next one.
Nice.
Thanks for listening to One Bad Podcast.